The calculations were absolute. The simulations, run 1 trillion times by the quantum synapse cores of the High Fleet, were flawless. The species known as humanity, inhabiting the third rock of a yellow dwarf star, was a mathematical certainty to surrender. They were fractured, divided by imaginary lines on maps, squabbling over resources, and technologically infantile compared to the glitzy, faster-than-light majesty of the Xar'thos hegemony. High Archon Vrex stood upon the bridge of the Gilded Edict, a dreadnought the size of a small moon, and looked down at the blue marble spinning in the void. To him, it did not look like a home. It looked like a gas station, a resource depot, a frantic, messy little colony waiting for the guiding hand of a superior civilization. The hegemony had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had integrated species far older and wiser than these apes. The protocol was always the same. Arrive in overwhelming force, block out their sun with the silhouette of the fleet, broadcast the declaration of compliance, and wait for the local leaders to prostrate themselves. The actuarial algorithms predicted a 99.8% chance of total unconditional surrender within 6 standard hours. The remaining 0.2% allowed for a singular, symbolic resistance that would be put down with a single orbital lance strike. Vrex adjusted his ceremonial sash and nodded to the communications officer. Send the message. The broadcast went out on every frequency. Radio, television, cellular, microwave. It hijacked every screen from Times Square to Tokyo. It overrode military comms and civilian playlists. The message was simple, translated perfectly into every human language. Citizens of Sol 3, you have been chosen. Your chaos ends today. Submit to the Xar'thos hegemony, and you will be uplifted. Resist, and you will be erased. You have 1 hour to disable your planetary defenses and transmit your codes of surrender. We await your gratitude. Vrex clasped his hands behind his back. He enjoyed this part, the silence before the capitulation. He imagined the panic down there, the awe. He imagined them looking up at his ships, shimmering with golden energy shields, and realizing that their petty wars were over. 1 hour passed. The communications officer shifted uncomfortably in his harness. Archon, we are receiving a transmission from the surface. Vrex smiled. Put it on the main viewer. Let us hear their plea. The screen flickered. It did not show a world leader. It did not show a general in a polished uniform. It showed a figure sitting in a dimly lit bunker, wearing a battered combat helmet and smoking a synthetic cigar. The human looked tired. He looked bored. He leaned into the camera, exhaling a cloud of smoke that obscured the lens for a moment. Yeah, we got your message, the human said, his voice raspy. We took a vote. Vrex leaned forward. And the consensus is, the human continued, flicking, ash off the table, go to hell. The transmission cut. Vrex blinked. The bridge crew fell silent. The sheer audacity was difficult to process. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a casual dismissal, as if the hegemony were a door-to-door salesman being told to leave the porch. Burn it, Vrex whispered. The algorithms had failed. Very well. If they want to be erased, we shall oblige. Target their capital cities. Commence the pacification protocols. The Gilded Edict and its escort fleet of 300 destroyers shifted formation. The energy ports opened. Beams of coherent light, hot enough to boil oceans, began to charge. But the Xar'thos had made their first mistake. They assumed that because the humans were silent for that hour, they had been debating. They hadn't been debating. They had been loading. The warning sirens on the Gilded Edict screamed a split second before impact. From the surface of the Earth, It didn't look like laser fire. It didn't look like the elegant plasma weaponry the hegemony used. It looked like the planet was spitting. Thousands of trails of fire erupted from the continents. Not energy beams, missiles. But not just missiles. The humans were firing kinetic slugs, massive tungsten rods, accelerated to fractions of the speed of light by electromagnetic railguns buried deep inside mountains. The Xar'thos shields were designed to disperse energy. They were designed to refract lasers and absorb plasma. They were not designed to catch a telephone pole-sized rod of dense metal moving at Mach 20. The first impact hit a destroyer on the port flank. There was no explosion, not at first. The tungsten rod simply punched through the golden shield like a needle through silk, slammed into the hull, and exited the other side, taking the ship's reactor core with it. The destroyer crumpled, venting atmosphere and crew into the void before detonating in a silent blossom of fire. Then the second hit, then the 100th. The bridge of the Gilded Edict shook violently. Sparks rained from the ceiling. "Report!" Vrex roared, clutching his command chair. "They are using solid matter projectiles," the tactical officer screamed, his voice trembling. "Primitive ballistics. Our shields cannot harmonize with the kinetic frequency." The humans weren't fighting a sci-fi war. They were throwing rocks, very fast, very heavy rocks. And the hegemony, in all its advanced wisdom, had forgotten how to dodge a rock. "Pull back," Vrex ordered. "High orbit. Get us out of the gravity well." The fleet retreated, leaving burning wreckage drifting in low orbit. The first engagement had lasted 12 minutes. The hegemony had lost 20 ships. The humans had lost nothing but ammunition. But Vrex was not a fool. He was a conqueror. He realized now that this would not be a police action. It would be a war. And if the humans wanted to fight with dirt and metal, he would bury them in it. The hegemony adapted. They recalibrated their shields to deflect kinetic impacts, though it drained their power reserves significantly. They launched drop pods. If the humans controlled the sky with their railguns, the Xar'thos would take the ground. Millions of Xar'thos shock troopers, encased in bioceramic armor and wielding plasma rifles, descended upon Earth's major population centers. They expected to find terrified civilians. They expected routed armies. What they found was a meat grinder. The invasion of the North American continent was the first indication that something was deeply wrong with human psychology. The Xar'thos landed in the ruins of the cities they had bombarded, expecting to sweep through the rubble. Instead, the rubble shot back. The humans did not fight in formation. They did not line up to be vaporized. They fought from the sewers. They fought from the subway tunnels. They rigged skyscrapers to collapse on top of landing zones. Squad leader Nix of the 7th Shock Battalion led his team through the shattered streets of what was once Chicago. The sky was choked with ash. His visor scanned for heat signatures, but the humans had learned. They wore thermal dampening cloaks made of simple emergency foil. They covered themselves in cold mud. "Clear the sector," Nix commanded over the neural link. They moved past the skeleton of a bus. Suddenly, the ground beneath them erupted. It wasn't a high-tech mine. It was a fertilizer bomb, crude, dirty, and utterly devastating. The blast wave liquefied 2 of his squad mates instantly. "Ambush!" Nix screamed. Bullets hailed from the windows of the ruined buildings. The Xar'thos armor could stop a few rounds, but the humans weren't firing single shots. They were using rotary cannons that spewed 3,000 rounds a minute. They were using high-caliber sniper rifles that punched holes through concrete barriers. Nix returned fire, his plasma rifle melting a human insurgent into slag. But for everyone he killed, 2 more seemed to crawl out of the debris. They were relentless. They fought with a savage desperation that the Xar'thos could not comprehend. The Xar'thos fought for the glory of the hegemony. They fought because they were ordered to. The humans fought because they lived here. In the European theater, the Xar'thos mechanized walkers, towering tripods of death, were halted not by energy cannons, but by brave teams of humans running between their legs, with satchel charges and magnetic grapples. They tripped the mighty war machines with steel cables, and swarmed them like ants on a beetle, prying open the cockpits with crowbars and welding torches. It was brutal. It was visceral. The aliens expected a clean conquest. They got a knife fight in the mud. Weeks turned into months. The 6-hour war had become a nightmare of attrition. High Archon Vrex watched the casualty reports scroll across his screen. It was impossible. The humans were losing millions, yes. Their cities were leveled. Their fleets were non-existent. But they would not stop. Every time the Xar'thos took a city, the humans burned it down behind them. Scorched earth. They poisoned their own water supplies to deny it to the invaders. They detonated tactical nuclear devices on their own soil to wipe out beachheads. They are insane, Vrex muttered, pacing the bridge. They value victory over survival. No, Archon, the tactical officer said softly. To them, victory is survival. Vrex had had enough. The ground war was a stalemate. The atmospheric fighters were being swatted out of the sky by human pilots, who flew their jets like they were trying to crash them, pulling maneuvers that liquefied their own internal organs, just to get a kill shot. Recall the legions, Vrex ordered. The bridge crew looked at him. Retreat, sir. No, Vrex hissed. We stop playing their game. If we cannot conquer the surface, we will crack it. Prepare the World Breaker. The World Breaker was a weapon of last resort. It was a gravity wave generator capable of destabilizing a planet's tectonic plates. It wouldn't just kill the humans. It would turn their world into a volcanic hellscape. It would render Earth uninhabitable, but it would end the war. The device was massive, a spire of black metal towed by 3 cruisers. As it began to descend into the upper atmosphere, the humans went silent. The railguns stopped firing. The chatter on the radio frequencies ceased. They know, Vrex said, watching the main screen. They know checkmate when they see it. The World Breaker began its charge cycle. A low hum resonated through the hull of every ship in the fleet. The clouds below began to swirl in unnatural patterns. Then the signal came. It wasn't a surrender. It was a laugh. A cold, mechanical, pre-recorded laugh broadcast on a loop. And then the moon exploded. Vrex spun around to the rear-view screen. What? Not the whole moon. The humans had built something on the dark side. Something they had kept hidden for decades, perhaps longer. A mass driver, but not a military railgun. This was an industrial engine, designed to launch colonization ships. They had overloaded it. They had dismantled their own lunar colonies, fed the debris into the chamber, and pointed it at the Xar'thos fleet. A stream of hyper-velocity debris, thousands of tons of rock and metal, was hurtling toward them. It was a shotgun blast on a cosmic scale. Evasive maneuvers, Vrex screamed. It was too late. The debris field wasn't aiming for the ships. It was aiming for the space between the ships. The moment the rocks hit the Xar'thos shields, they shattered into millions of smaller fragments. But the humans had mixed something in with the rocks. Dust, metallic chaff, billions of tiny magnetized particles. The cloud engulfed the fleet. Instantly, the sensors went blind. The targeting computers crashed, overwhelmed by the density of the interference. The glorious Xar'thos fleet was suddenly flying blind in a sandstorm. And then, the humans launched the real attack. From the oceans of Earth, from the deep trenches where the pressure was enough to crush a submarine, the Leviathans rose. They weren't ships. They were barely airtight. They were refitted cargo haulers, strapped with every engine the humans could find. They were suicide ships. They rocketed up from the atmosphere, hidden by the sensor-blinding dust cloud. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't hail the enemy. They simply accelerated. Ramming speed, the human commanders ordered. On the bridge of the Gilded Edict, Vrex watched in horror as the red proximity alarms blared. "They are colliding with us?" he whispered. "This is not war. This is madness." A human freighter, loaded with high-yield explosives, slammed into the side of a Xylanth cruiser. The explosion was absolute. The cruiser snapped in half. Another human ship, this one little more than a cockpit bolted to a nuclear reactor, drove itself directly into the gravity well of the world breaker. The impact destabilized the tectonic weapon. The gravity drive flared, whined, and then imploded. The resulting singularity swallowed the world breaker and the three cruisers towing it, crumpling them like paper before vanishing in a flash of hawking radiation. The fleet was in chaos, blinded, battered, and besieged by suicidal apes who treated their own lives as ammunition. Vrex looked at the tactical map. It was a sea of red. "We cannot fight this," the tactical officer said, ripping off his headset. "They do not care if they die, Archon. How do you defeat an enemy that does not fear the end?" "You don't," Vrex realized. "You leave." "Full retreat," Vrex bellowed. "Jump to hyperspace. Any coordinates. Just get us out of this system." The survivors of the High Fleet turned and ran. They abandoned their troops on the surface. They abandoned their dignity. The Gilded Edict powered its drive, the fabric of space tearing open before it. As the stars stretched into lines, Vrex took one last look at Earth. It was burning. The atmosphere was choked with smoke. The cities were gone. But it was still there. And the little red dots representing the human defense fleet were chasing them to the very edge of the system. The humans were still shooting as the Xylanth faded away. 5 years later, the wreckage of the Gilded Edict sat in a museum, but not a Xylanth one. It lay in the crater of what used to be Central Park. Vines grew over the golden hull. Children played on the deactivated plasma cannons. Humanity had not just survived. They had scavenged. The war had devastated Earth, yes. Half the population was gone. The climate was ruined. But the Xylanth had left behind a gift: their technology. In the ruins of the invasion, human engineers, the most terrifyingly ingenious creatures in the galaxy, had reverse-engineered everything. They took the gravity drives and bolted them to battleships. They took the plasma reactors and used them to power the rebuilding of the cities. They took the data cores and learned the location of the Xylanth homeworld. In a secret shipyard orbiting Mars, the first Terran dreadnought was coming online. It didn't look like the elegant, smooth curves of the Xylanth ships. It was blocky. It was ugly. It was covered in armor plates thick enough to take a meteor strike. It bristled with railguns and nuclear silos. It was named the TNS Spite. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Spite. He adjusted his uniform. He looked at the star map. The coordinates for the Xylanth hegemony were locked in. He keyed the fleet-wide comms. "This is Admiral Vance. 5 years ago they came to our house. They told us to kneel. They told us we were weak. They broke our cities. They killed our families. They thought that because we bleed, we break." A low rumble of agreement came from the crews of 1,000 ships. Ships built from the bones of the enemy. "They forgot one thing," Vance continued, his eyes cold and hard like flint. "You don't kick the nest unless you're ready for the swarm. Today, we return the favor. Today, we go to their house, and we aren't going to ask them to surrender." He looked at his helmsman. "Spin up the drives. Target the Xar'thos capital system." The engines of the Terran fleet roared to life, glowing with a fierce, angry red light. "Let's show them what total devastation really looks like." The fleet jumped. The space where they had been was empty, leaving only the silent, recovering Earth spinning in the darkness. Somewhere, thousands of light years away, High Archon Vrex woke up in a cold sweat. He didn't know why. He was safe in the heart of the hegemony, surrounded by the greatest fleet in the galaxy. But he felt a chill, a primal instinct buried deep in his DNA, screaming at him. He walked to the window of his palace, looking up at the night sky. The stars flickered, and then the sky began to burn. The humans had arrived, and this time they weren't the ones trapped on a gravity well. This time they were the hammer. The invasion of the Xar'thos homeworld did not last months. It did not last weeks. The humans dropped out of hyperspace inside the planetary defense perimeter, a maneuver the Xar'thos considered impossible, suicidal. But the humans didn't care about safety ratings. They unleashed a barrage of such intensity that the orbital stations didn't just explode. They evaporated. The Spite rammed the primary shipyard, firing point-blank broadsides into the docking bays. Vrex watched the screens in his war room, paralyzed. "They are hailing us, Archon. Put it through," Vrex whispered. The screen flickered to life. It was Vance. He looked older than the human from 5 years ago. "Harder. Remember us?" Vance asked. We offered you peace," Vrex stammered. "We offered you order." "You offered us chains," Vance corrected. "And now, we're here to return them." Vrex watched as the sky above his capital filled with drop pods. But these weren't soldiers coming to occupy. These were heavy exosuits, mechs, tanks dropping from orbit without parachutes, using retro thrusters to slam into the pavement with the force of a bomb. The Xar'thos guards, who had never fought a defensive war in their history, broke and ran. They had technology, but they lacked grit. They lacked the scar tissue that humanity had spent 5,000 years accumulating. The doors to Vrex's command center blew inward. Dust swirled in the room. Through the haze walked a squad of human marines. Their armor was scarred, painted with shark mouths and tally marks. They didn't hold energy weapons. They held automatic shotguns and heavy rifles. Vrex fell to his knees. "I yield," he screamed. "I yield. We surrender." The lead Marine walked up to him. He was a giant of a man, his helmet faceplate cracked and repaired with duct tape. He looked down at the alien overlord. "You yield?" the Marine asked, his voice amplified by the suit's speakers. "Yes. Take the planet. Just spare us." The Marine looked at his squad. Then he looked back at Vrex. "We don't want your planet," the Marine said. "We have our own. We just wanted to make sure you never come back." The Marine raised his weapon. "But we're not monsters," the Marine said, lowering the gun slightly. "We're teachers. And class is in session." He gestured to the window. "Look." Vrex looked. The Terran fleet wasn't glassing the cities. They were targeting the military infrastructure, the shipyards, the weapons factories, the government centers. They were surgically removing the Xar'thos' ability to ever wage war again. "We're going to leave you here." Vance's voice came over the comms again. "We're going to leave you in the Stone Age. You wanted to see who was superior. Now you can spend the next 1,000 years thinking about it while you learn to bang rocks together." The Terran fleet finished its bombardment. The Xar'thos Empire, the scourge of the galaxy, was dismantled in 12 hours. Not destroyed, neutered. As the humans prepared to leave, Vrex wept. He wept for his loss, for his pride. Why? he sobbed. "Why didn't you just kill us?" The Marine paused at the door. He looked back over his shoulder. "Because," the human said, "dead men don't tell stories. We want you to tell everyone what happened here. We want you to tell the rest of the galaxy that there is one system they should never, ever visit." The Marine racked the slide of his shotgun. "Tell them Earth is closed. The humans left." They returned to their scarred blue marble, to rebuild, to heal, and to watch the stars. They were no longer the squabbling tribes. They were the guardians of the dark. They were the species that had looked into the abyss of extinction and spat in its eye. And across the galaxy, the rumor spread. A whisper among the alien councils. A warning etched into star charts. Do not go to Sol 3. The primitives there. They do not know how to die. And if you try to teach them, they will break the universe just to prove you wrong. Humanity had not just won. They had changed the game. They had proven that technology is nothing without the will to use it, and that the most dangerous thing in the cosmos isn't a laser beam or a plasma cannon. It is a human being who has been told they have no choice. Because that is when the impossible happens. That is when the physics bend. That is when the predators become the prey. The galaxy had expected Earth to yield. They got nothing but total devastation. And they would never make that mistake again.